Welcome to Strategy and Solidarity Pod, the podcast. I am your co-host, Carlos Wyndham, and this is another special episode. This episode is going to feature a conversation between myself and your co-host, Theresa Logan. It is from her program that she's been offering in Strategy and Solidarity, the collective space, our platform. Over on the platform, she's been offering an ongoing workshop called Change Requires Action. And it's really been very, very inspirational. I was asked by Theresa to give some more details and get a little bit more into what it really takes to create change at an institution, to create change in a community. And the reference point that we worked from was the establishment of the Ethnic Studies program at the University of Colorado Boulder. This will be the intro and outro that is recorded separately from everything else that you'll be hearing. I hope you'll enjoy and that you will be back with us again next week. Thanks so much for listening. Thanks so much for being here. We do appreciate you. Take good care of yourself and each other and enjoy the podcast.
Good afternoon, everyone. We are back with our next edition. Hey, Jack. Hey, Carlos of Change Requires Action. And I'm going to invite Carlos to join me today and talk about a little bit of a case study with some of the things we have covered in the previous weeks. And as Carlos is getting in here, I'll do a little quick reminder. So when we had a whole bunch of folks join in the past couple months and I put up a survey and asked, what are you most interested in, what skills are you most interested in developing? And folks told me community organizing and strategy development. And so we've been talking for the last few weeks about community organizing and strategy development. And we started week 1. Hey, Carlos, thanks for joining me today. We talked week 1 about clarifying our goals and our vision. What are we trying to do and why? We talked week 2 about who are we trying to do things with, because we can't do, unless you're a billionaire, and even if you are a billionaire, you still need other people to do things with and for you. If they had no one to work with them, money would be irrelevant. It's only that their money allows them to access other people's energy, that they're able to use that money to do things. And so we talked about mapping the ecosystem of who are your potential partners, who are you trying to build with and why. Then we talked some about interests and positions and what it takes to recruit people to join you, thinking about what are their interests and needs and how do you organize around an interest, even if you don't align on all of your values and goals. And so today I thought we would talk some about organizing and action. And Carlos has a great story, many great stories, but one in particular that seems like a great case study to talk through some of the things we've covered in the previous weeks, as well as think about what it takes to really pull off a successful action. So welcome, Carlos. How are you doing today?
I am doing okay. Thank you. Can you hear me okay? My headphones are not working properly, so I'm not sure what's happening there.
No, you sound great on this end.
Okay, I just want to make sure you're not getting too much echo because I'm going to have to listen to you through the computer.
No,
all right.
I know that's your favorite. All right, so I'm going to I've heard this story a couple times, so I'm going to summarize what I understand to be the key points of the action you pulled off in college.
The tidbits.
That almost sounded inappropriate. Okay, so as I understand it, When you were a college student, you and some of your cohorts staged a hunger strike that succeeded in pressuring the University of Colorado at Boulder and establishing a ethnic studies department, including undergraduate and graduate degrees that had not previously existed, and that this was in conjunction with some other universities around the country that were also trying to do the same thing, and that you did succeed in getting one of the first ethnic studies departments established at University of Colorado at Boulder.
Indeed. These are
correct.
facts.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if we just kind of work through the other pieces, so like, how did you decide this was a thing you needed to do as a junior, senior?
I was junior because I had the privilege. I didn't have to. I had the privilege of doing my senior seminar with Dr. Walling Dotson, and that seminar happened with about 18 of the undergraduate students who were part of that movement. And Dr. Dotson, she was somebody who required a level of academic formality and rigor that would have been expected of a master's program. And so we did get to do that with her in that department. The department was born
in the ethnic studies department you helped
ethnic
establish.
Studies, yes. Yeah.
As a senior, so you got to graduate with a degree from that program.
Yeah. What made that particular movement, I think, well, two things. One, every movement is very particular, right? But what made that movement what it was at that time in the 90s was that we were an undergraduate movement, an undergraduate-led movement, an undergraduate designed movement. The movement was certainly not one that I did in isolation. It was in great collaboration with a great number of people. And the idea, including the idea, which was given to me by this kid named Ryan, who I was in an American Studies class with, and would get quite frustrated. So I would leave. And he witnessed this happen more than once.
You would leave class?
Sorry?
You said you would leave? You would leave class or leave campus?
Yeah, I would not leave campus. I would leave the classroom. I would sit outside of it and smoke a joint and and do
the caucasity in the room was too much to endure.
Well, it was the teacher was the one who was the too much caucasity. I mean, the thing is, like, the idea of critical thinking was what I wanted to be doing, which is why I was in American Studies, because I was hoping that by cataloging events and history, it would help enlighten the moment and the very transformative moment in which the United States found itself in 1993, 4, post Rodney King, post OJ, Clarence Thomas is on the Supreme Court. Like, things are getting weird, right? At the same time, neo liberalism is moving into vogue, and nobody quite knows what to do, right? Timothy McVeigh's on the scene. Like, it's very shaky. With all of that, the idea of looking to the past for answers to the future made sense to me. So I had begun in philosophy. I was having the same experience there. I was bringing in text with which my instructors were unfamiliar and unable to respond. And so I moved on. And I went to American Studies, figuring, well, at least it's contemporary, so now we'll be able to deal with it. And the crossing point for me was talking about the Haymarket Rebellion and the trial of the Chicago Nine that was born from that. And it was said with such an incredibly white slant that was devoid of understanding or even willing to explore why the white men who were primarily there were the ones who were there. The level of apartheid that was happening in the country at that time in the industrial age, and then that it was happening in that area of Chicago. And so I had asked the professor very snottily to compare and contrast that and the trial of the Chicago Seven, including the Chicago Nine, up through Bobby Seale and the treatment of Black folks correlating to the courts. And I kind of knew she wasn't going to be able to. And she said that she would not be able to.
Very frustrated that the level of intellectual dialogue and discussion and critique that you're looking
the discourse
for
was not it. The discourse was not it.
How do we go from the frustration that many college students feel, especially students of color stuck in predominantly white institutions, to a hunger strike? What was what was the bridge? Where did you get to the idea of we need to pressure the university to start this ethnic studies department?
I was part of a program with which I was also a bit frustrated called Invest. It does not exist any longer. It was the International National Volunteer Service Training Program. That's where I completed my certificate in Peace and Conflict Studies as the senior project. And I was reminded of this by my peers. I will say that as well. We had to have an action, not an action. We had to have an investment that we were making into the community to be able to speak to. I'll say it that way. A service action. Ryan who was another student in American Studies, not in that program, had seen my frustration, as had 5 or 6 of my friends who sat in the back row, and we sort of made fun of the teacher quite often, like the sweat hogs. Ryan saw me getting very much on edge and said, "Hey, we could do something about this. You could do, you know what you should do instead of just fighting with her, like we should get ethnic studies formed." And I was like, "What are you talking about? And what does that even mean?" And, he explained to me what the field is, right? Which was essentially an umbrella under which you can house the areas of study of African American studies, Native American studies, Chicano studies at the time, Latino American studies, basically anything that's not just white people, and is in the Americas, in the United States specifically. And I found that to be very interesting as an idea, and thought, "Ooh, that'd be neat to graduate in." So
what was Ryan's investment in ethnic studies?
He just wanted to do it. And he also, we were buddies, so he also didn't want to see me explode.
Was this a white kid? Is this another student
No,
of
little
color?
scrawny hippie white kid. Little scrawny hippie white kid.
How did he even know about ethnic studies?
Hyper intellectual. Just, a lot of, listen, a lot of my friends may have been autistics who had a thing about justice and did not have better ways to relate to each other than smoking weed and talking about these ideas about what an intellectual purity might look like and why school was doing it wrong and how we would fix it. So
interesting. Maybe it sounds like
for
could
a
be
hobby.
a tad of white saviorism in there with the justice sensitivity, perhaps.
Completely. At this time, the white kids who were, and Gen X knows this, and I hope they're not embarrassed about it, were in African studies and African dance classes were also very dirty and had dreadlocks and did not smell good and were irritating as shit. And it was the 90s. We were all learning. We weren't there. My
So we're gonna
women's
assume.
studies area was not. I was not developed in my gender studies either. We weren't there.
I'm gonna assume someone had influenced Ryan, that this wasn't his original idea, but probably a faculty member, a student association, some unknown influence.
Yeah,
that
I don't
introduced
know
this
if he
idea to
heard
him.
about it at a student program. I mean, by the time I had plugged into the idea, there were schools in Virginia, in California, I believe it was, and I'm going from memory. I believe it was San Diego. I believe it was not Berkeley. It was based on Berkeley. There were a few other schools that we were collaborating with. And this is in the time pre-internet. So we're on the phone with people on calling cards across the country, trying to coordinate as best we could. And I essentially
so this was a pre-existing movement that y'all were tapping into.
We were building a movement. There were folks who were interested. It was bubbling. There was conversation. I was very lucky to get into the national conversation. And as somebody who is roundly autistic, my number one special interest is this kid. And so a field of study where I could study myself and do self-documentarian work, man, for an undiagnosed 20-odd-year-old, that was ideal. So I threw myself into it. And basically, there's a thing of mirroring that can happen for a lot of neurodiverse and neurospicy folk, where we are able to gather information, adapt it, and then reflect it back and out very, very quickly, sounding exactly like those who have invested very long hours into it. So I know that there were movements being led by professors, movements being led by scholars, movements being led by all sorts of folk who were not undergraduate around the country at the same time. I just happened to be an undergraduate who was in a program that said, hey, you're also surrounded by a bunch of other very, very, very far left organizers and activists and people who are trying to impact the world. And an awful lot of amount of white guilt. And can that, along with my identities, I don't know. No, it's one identity. It's just I have multiple places I can go. Being part of the American Indian movement, the African American BSA, being a part of Umasi Mecha. That
these are all organizations
all
you were involved in on campus?
Already, yes. I was already involved in each of them, looking for place, right? And that was the other thing about my locking in so hard, was that I had been searching for a place, right? I had been...
When you were already very well networked, right? Like you already were in all of these places and well known and had existing networks and relationships you're able to tap into. You weren't starting from scratch as a kid who never talked to anyone in the back of the room.
No. At that point, I had already been... So yeah, I had a newspaper column. I was arguing with Professor Emeriti in long text, in publication, on the regular.
What was your newspaper column?
It was the column that was... There was a column that had been created about 5 years before that for BSA, and just left to the side. And a senior in BSA at the time basically, pulled me to the side and hit me to it. I, again, was the kind of person who, and we were a generation of paper. It was not that odd for me to just hand out my writing to friends because autistic. And so I would just give off writings to friends and such. I would just go off about how
It was before we had social media. That was how you shared your random special interests with people. You just hand them newspaper clippings. And
I would sit in a coffee shop by myself. I would write, I would journal, I and then I read just voraciously. And then I had this idea about school that what we were supposed to be doing was to actually be developing the philosopher class that was spoken about in the Republic, that was born of Egyptian philosophy, hierarchies, and what have you. And I was like, okay, great. That's what I'm doing. I'm locking the fuck in. I'm going to do something important, not be a theater kid. I'm going to be a scholar and a lawyer and be a good marshal and this, that, and the third. Clearly didn't have the discipline for that. But the search for truth and a foundation, and how did we end up here again in the time of OJ and Rodney King and John Benet Ramsey, was like, okay, what the fuck is going on? How did we get here? So that was
lots of
doing that
historical social critique
was the want for me. And because I had searched so many places at the university, right, from theater to philosophy to American studies to to this Invest group, I was relatively well known in each of these pockets. And so that was the platform that through which I was able to bring these different worlds together. I'd been a diversity counselor, right? I'd been diversity whatever up to that point, and was trying to figure out how to formalize that into myself into work life, right? And rather, what happened is, working with other folks collectively, right? By, again, from that platform of sharing with people, hey, I want this to be different than that. These are the reasons. Because I really felt like if people understood stuff, they would just change their minds and then they would do it. I didn't understand it was that I was actually doing the lobbying and like meeting with people one-on-one and inviting people to coffee and smoking with people and getting people to feel like they were part of a thing.
Who were the people you were inviting to do these things?
Oh God, it started with my group in Invest, but I would do weird like I had a friend of mine with whom I used to smoke.
And it sounds like you were doing this before you were establishing movement. So by the time you were starting to move towards action, you had already established these relationships.
Oh yeah.
I had and smoking, hanging out under the tree.
Yes. Yeah, I had them all separately, right? Like I had a group of friends with whom I would sit under the tree and the quad. We called it the philosopher's tree. And we would just meet there and smoke for 2 hours and talk shit.
Was this before or after Dead Poets Society had come out?
Well before.
Okay, so you already, I think this is a really important point, is that you had already deeply invested, even though you may not have consciously thought, I'm going about building community. You were very actively engaged in building a huge network, it sounds like, being the popular person on campus, of all these different places where you were building relationships and proactively reaching out to people and establishing and kind of getting a sense of who was in alignment around values and needs. And even though that was not your conscious intent, you did a whole lot of organizing work ahead of time to establish those relationships, figure out where people were on, political alignment and affiliation and affinity, and were able to draw on those relationships when it was time to move towards action.
Yeah, I mean, it's really investing in community, investing in people, right? And investing in ways that will create places of inclusion, right? Now, I don't know that it wasn't from a place, initially, well, I'm sure it was, of how do I create audience or platform or, what have you. And as I was doing that, there was never a time that I didn't want to also say something about creating a better world, right? Whether it was as juvenile as, inspirational Kirby Shaw or Michael Jackson lyrics in the 70s and 80s, right? Around like we can move through all the human shit and get to like connecting together all the way through fight the power and trying to figure out how to connect people through theater and through action and through live action all the way through. Okay, well, what if it's policy, right? Oh, it's not okay, well, what if it's the philosophical praxis of how we do this? And then finally just like, all right, you know what, let me just study this. Just give me a break. I'm tired of I got tired of arguing with people about what is true, foundationally, factually true, right? And in the philosophy department in American Studies, it was a lot of white professors telling me, or no, I can't. Elvis was the king of rock and roll. Great. Can you please speak to how Elvis thieved from Rosetta Thorpe and married a 14-year-old? What? Okay, bye.
No, I can't. That doesn't align with my mythology.
Yeah,
okay, so we're here, we're in this cultural moment where lots of things are changing, and you're in college and you have all these networks, you're engaged in all these things, you're looking for a way to create change in the world, you're looking for a place to belong. Ryan, the white hippie boy, had heard about ethnic studies somewhere. He says, we should start this. And then what led you from there to a hunger strike?
Not being listened to. And again, absolute determination. I mean, the thing is, if you see, I don't know. I know it sounds hokum because there are so many areas of our lives where we have not created or invested in the community and circumstances in order to activate and concretize the ideas that we may hold, right? And that's for most people. So when I hear people who are well-resourced, well-networked, telling people who are isolated that all you got to do is manifest it, to me, that's some weird culty bullshit that does not speak to investing in community, right? And being a part of community and knowing that nothing can happen alone. And so the movement to get to the hunger strike was not about deciding, hey, you know what would be neat? Let's torture ourselves. It was about the institution being unwilling to move forward with ideas that I had brought to them first as part of formal student government, then as part of, well, first it was part of informal student government and those student groups of which I was speaking. Then it was with the formal student government, because of course many of the folks in government were also in those groups, as student governments were interested in diversifying at the time. So we tried that formally. We tried it
So
formally
you
with
took
alumni.
a resolution from student government to the dean or
Different members of regions.
president or
The
regents,
different members of
and you
regions
said,
to the College of Arts and Science.
we want you to found an ethnic studies program so we can get
wanted
ethnic studies free.
explored. This is what it could look like. I created based on, and when I say I created, it was not that I invented every class. I essentially aggregated every class that could go in an ethnic studies field of study from every student offering book. I forgot what they're even called, course catalog, for the last 3 years, and included everything that was in what was then called the Center for Research and Ethnicity and Race in America, and as well as American Studies, as well as every field of study, basically that fit under that umbrella of which I was speaking earlier. And I created a catalog and was like, look, this is how you could do it. And I shared it, in all of these formal places. I shared it with my classmates in Invest, who.
And no one asked you to do this. You just did this.
Yeah. And then
you were just like, here, I'll cut and paste and show you what it could look like.
Yeah. And I did the research and whatever. And, after that got shut down multiples of times, and we had the privilege of working with folks who either were true organizers, being taught by, had been organizers, were activists, and or created academic mythologies where they painted themselves as activists, all of whom were invested in our being very in showing that the service training in which they had invested was going to turn into something. And so
what did you all think was going to be different when you had an ethnic studies program?
Oh, just that we would be able to stay working with professors who we knew, who respected us, with whom we had relationship, right? Because it goes back to that idea. And I realized that the success that I experienced was because of the same thing of how you will be able to move is how people will feel with you. Right? If they feel revolutionary and badass because the tactics that I'm using are born of not only Invest and all of these architects with whom we were working, but looking at Kwame Nkrumah's revolutionary warfare and, Che Guevara and the, whatever books might not be legal anymore, using those as a foundational picture, because at that time we really thought that we were now. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, we felt like in 1991 that we were right now where we are, and in this place of tumult that was fascism. Not that we were being led into it. We thought we were there already, very mistakenly. And
okay,
so we studied past movements and used those techniques. People felt included. They felt seen. They felt the love of the Nirvana and the teen spirit, and and there was a search for multiculturalism as well, and that idea really was one that was seen as virtuous. And so the idea of creating this space, what we thought was going to happen is that we would be able to continue to foster this space and have one that celebrated us as students and had people feeling that kind of included in our programs rather than as enemy combatants at a PWI.
So I heard a few different things in there, that by creating the ethnic studies program, you were going to have, I think you said at a different time, tenure for the professors you most trusted.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well,
And
tenure for 3 professors. Your sound is crackling just a little bit. I'm not sure what's happening.
let me see if I take off these headphones, if that helps at all. Any better?
Tiz, sounds like you're coming through your computer now. Sorry, y'all. This happened the other day when I was doing Monday Moments, and that's why there's not a recording now. I apologize. Oh, there you are. Hey.
Keep rolling with it. Hey, okay.
You sound
so
great.
I heard what was going to be different with an ethnic studies program is having a place for students of color in particular, it sounds like, and also the adjacent white folks, to have a place where you felt belonging, where you were represented, where you could be celebrated, and where you could continue down the paths of study that felt most meaningful and relevant, instead of feeling like it was always on the side of whatever the dominant white culture was, as well as getting tenure for some professors, or having more professors that you were able to bring in, who were the ones you actually trusted to know what they were talking about. And that it was also really important to feel like you could create change, and to be able to have studied revolutionary movements and feel like you were actually putting what you'd learned into practice in the places where you had control, where you had some influence, not control, but where you had some power and some influence. And so for action, so that's your goal. And then actions, a couple things that you shared that's important to point out is that you didn't just have an idea and start demanding things. You put a lot of thought and research into it. There was a lot of study and preparation. It's one thing I often tell our clients is, like, if you have an idea for what you want to be different, then write up a proposal and give it to whoever is in charge of that thing, right? Just telling people you want them to do work is great, but they're not usually going to do more work on top of whatever they're already doing. But taking that initiative to go and put together your own course catalog of, like, this is what the ethnic studies department would look like. Here's how it would be populated. Who would be there. Now you're giving a vision. Now you're actually sharing an implementable vision with someone. That's a different conversation than I want you to go create something that lives in my mind that you're not invested in, which unfortunately, because we are, just fed all this entitlement all the time in our culture, the way folks move sometimes, which is like, we want you to do something different. We're not going to tell you what it is. We don't know how you're going to do it. We don't care if there's no money for it. We still demand that you do something differently. And it's one of those places where I tell people that's a very reasonable demand, but it's not realistic. Yeah. And so part of what I think is important in this example, there's so many things, the whole ecosystem of how many different people were involved and how you were kind of key because you had already put in so much time and effort, partly just because you couldn't help yourself, building relationships and being involved in so many different places. You weren't just someone sitting there by yourself. It wouldn't have worked probably if it was just Ryan trying to do this without you. Yeah, my guess is he probably didn't have the same extent of networks and reach and ability to mobilize people that you did.
No, he could have mobilized
so he had the idea.
Community, but the Grateful Dead community was not the right community. So, and he knew that. So he was salud. He was again, right? And
you didn't have the idea by yourself. He also was the one who had heard the idea somewhere else and passed it on to you. And so I think it's important to remember that we don't all need to do the same role. We don't all have the same skills. We don't all have the same charisma or reach. And so figuring out where our skills can be useful and how they're much more useful together than individually trying to be the hero, I think is so important. Okay, so y'all you did your research, you put together some, parts of proposals or things to kind of informally lobby, it sounds like, at first, the regents or whoever the leadership was. And then
That's how it started. Yeah, it was
So
a full
informally
process.
means
Yeah.
like you scheduled an appointment to go to their office, or you sent them a letter. What did informally lobbying the regents look like?
No, there we went to many public meetings. We held a few private meetings. I had been on a bunch of different committees for the School of Arts and Sciences at that point, and so I had a relationship with our dean of the school at that time, Chuck Middleton. So I would just talk to Chuck directly. Um, it really is a matter of all of the networking ideas as well were ideas that came with skills that I gained by working for the scholarships that I held prior to that, right? So that level of networking of like, okay, where's the Student Resource Center? Who knows who? Who should I talk to? Send me to talk to whomever the elder of choice is, and let
You
me
really
listen
are
what they have to say.
analyzing the whole ecosystem and looking for where the points of power and
Yeah,
leverage might be, and where you have
and at that
access.
point, I kind of knew where those levers were, right?
Mhm.
But that's what I knew, and so
So
the
what was the
idea.
request? What was the request y'all were making in this informal
Oh,
lobby?
it was to departmentalize Sarah,
Mhm.
the Center for the Study of Ethnicity and Class in America. I mean, that was the goal, was departmentalization and to make it a formal field of study such that we could do something with it going forward.
And how was that request received through the informal efforts?
You know, the way that I think most of us great ideas around radical
That sounds great, but we
transformation
can't
of
do
the
that right
world.
now. Was it like that? Like, that's a great idea, kids. Keep coming up with
Well,
great ideas. We absolutely don't have any interest or ability or money to do that, but great
the,
idea.
the money would be what it would be said. It was the money, it was the time, it would not be possible, would take too long. And, we knew we were on a very short timeline. And so we were in discussion about, okay, how do we accelerate the timeline? That is where essentially the graduate students came into it as well. And I do not mean to talk poorly about, no, I won't talk poorly about specific people. I will say that there were people who were working with the grad students who held much more militant ideas about what movements needed to look like, and that those people were well paid to publish those ideas, right?
Mm.
And because they were around the center and were, well, there's not a way to get around it because Ward Churchill ended up becoming the first chair of the department. So there's no way around it. Ward,
Okay.
as a pretendian who was very invested in scholarship that was deep in resistance movements, focused far too heavily for.
He was a professor at this time.
Yes, he was for a
And he was
movement.
involved as like an advisor or something.
He was he yeah, he was one of the elders. I had a couple of conversations with him, but when the grad students got involved, they held more with him. And again, Timothy McVeigh had happened at this point. So radicalization toward the most extreme ideas around social transformation was not that out of pocket, right? So we were having discussions.
Still had some grad students who were interested in taking a heavier, more.
They wanted to take over
heavy-handed
buildings.
approach.
Yeah,
Okay.
they were. I was suggesting.
Okay, so this is after.
and such.
So this is after you had informally lobbied and they're like, yeah, great, but we don't have any money. And then you tried to formally lobby through student government, and that kind of got the same
Same kind of
reception.
thing. Same
And
kind of
now you're in
thing.
this place where more people have kind of joined the movement, or the loose movement that's coming together, and you kind of have a couple of, sounds like, different factions. This had started as undergraduate led, but some grad students were jumping in and wanted to take in kind of a different direction. So what were all the ideas on the table at that time? And it sounds like you had a timeline because you were going to graduate. And so if you wanted to graduate from ethnic studies, it needed to happen very quickly. And bureaucracy.
Well, it was that part of it, and it was the end of the year as well. So because it was also the end of the year, they saw us as a transient community, which we were. So their hope was just to wait us out. Of course. Which is going to be what is tried most often with any community in need, any community in the liminal spaces. I had seen that happen before with movements, and I had seen transformations that we made get flipped as soon as I was off the scene. And so I wanted to make sure that this got concretized very deeply. So that was where my interest was. When we met and gathered, myself and those folks who were in the Invest program, and I think there were at least 4 or 5 along with me. Michelle Foy, I know, was one, Janelle, and a couple of others as well, photographer Anna Davidson, of course, who were signatories on the first idea. So then each of us had our own networks. We brought together a group of people who went from being what we called Escape, which was called the Student Coalition for the Advancement of Ethnic Plurality. I made that up, of course, because I loved an acronym then. And then became the Alliance, because I love to name things, which was basically every student group that was part of it, right? So it was BSA, it was the American Student Movement, it was the Umasi Mecha, Gay Straight Alliance, every student alliance that we could think of. We were all in there having meetings now of both on and off campus, thinking groups, working groups, a large group, selection group, and doing it all by consensus. So anyone who wanted to throw anything at the wall could. So we had everything going from, should we arm ourselves? Absolutely not. That was off the table. Should we do building takeovers? A bunch of people wanted to do that. Should we march?
Well, there are times in history that's been effective, and then there's times it has not.
Absolutely. Do we march? Do we take over the president's offices? And on that list was, and the thing that I was really pressing for was, we have to be the ones putting ourselves on the line, not property, because this university clearly does not give a shit about us, or this would not be happening. So if we can convince parents, the press, anything that's going to deal with their money, that we've got a great idea and that the university is not going along with it, that's going to be the thing that's going to win us favor. And if they're under that kind of pressure, then we might get there before the year is over. Now, this was starting in like March, maybe. But, you know, if we're starting that in March, that's like right after spring break, after, you know, several months of all of the other things that had been happening to that point. So now around March, it's like, okay, we've got until June. What are we going to do? And by the time we got to mid-April, we'd been shut down from all of those places. And, you know, I looked at the math, we looked at the calculus, we looked at a bunch of different things. And myself and a few other people lobbied and said, okay, we should go on hunger strike. And we should do a full hunger strike. We should do water only. We are off of all caloric intake, and we can bring in. We were very well in touch with community members, such that we were able to do a First Peoples ceremony in the Dalton Trumbo fountain with everyone who was participating in the strike. We did all sorts of diet preparation advice for people that a lot of people did not take, around, okay, this is what you're going to want to do to get your body, your stomach ready for this thing. We took great investment in each other as well. There was, from that point, a student shantytown set up under the tree, under the Philosopher's Tree in the Quad. I did not stay there, but that was where I had been, holding gatherings and meetings and whatever, and forever. And so that's where folks who knew that if I had sent out the message to our network, meet at the Philosopher's Tree at XYZ time, that they would go. So then the kids who were sleeping in the Quad went there and set up full, group support shantytown. So
how did you
that's where it was born.
How did you persuade the people who wanted to occupy the building or just do a march kind of protest that the hunger strike was worthwhile?
It was
that
just
strategy.
It was consensus and long talk, and it was terrible.
What was the strategic analysis that persuaded people that was a more likely to be a winning strategy?
Again, it went back to the idea that, like, this administration, because they had shown us their priorities, was not going to move toward suddenly giving a shit about our ideas because we were sitting in a building. And so if they thought the building was threatened, then it was going to turn into a different thing. And if we're arrested, what are we going to do?
You looked at your opposition's interests and needs, and you realized that they cared more about their property and their money than they did about their students. And
their skills. They didn't have any skills, so they were going to bring in whatever forces they could.
And then you get dragged out and expelled and movement over. Whereas opposed to the hunger strike, it sounds like you looked at how do we gain support from the broader community who's not part of our movement, and where that kind of direct, competitive, aggressive tactic of occupying and getting in the way of other people trying to do the things they're trying to do and whatnot, that is often one that people promote. And again, there's times when every strategy can be the right strategy, can often lose support from the broader community who's not involved. When you look for one, which is like, if our parents and the community and other people see us putting our lives on the line, they will pressure the university to do something without us alienating people by blocking them from doing the things they're trying to do.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, as we're dropping information on and doing, drops on tours, right? School tours for incoming students and their families. We're giving out like clips from all of the papers that we've been in, this, that, and the third. We're in the National Education Review, as well as all the local papers, a couple of national papers. And we knew that for those who were leaning in the directions that we were leaning politically, that they would see that and go, oh, great. Okay, this place is actually invested in students in that way, or the students are invested in the campus that way. They believe in this that way. For those who were on the conservative side of things, it would just irritate them and fuck them, because what we were saying was, don't send your kids here. They don't care about kids. And that was the message that we wanted to make sure that the administration was hearing.
In person or in pamphlets, or how were you communicating this message?
In person, under masks.
When high school students were coming to do tours of the college, you would tell them and their parents the school does not care about you?
Yes, as they were on their
like
tours,
all of them, like
mapped out their tours. Oh, no, we'd map the tours, and then we would drop squad on them. there were signals, and then everyone would, the people on that committee would then drop down their masks and surround the tour,
With
uh,
masks. Interesting.
that said, and signs that said "Faceless Administrator," and would hand out both our demands and requests and what the administration had said to that point, and then would say, "Do not send your children here," ba, 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 so that the tours, when they got back, would report that, whether it was positive, negative, whatever, or would have questions. Like, we knew it was an
Now you mess with
adjective.
their money.
That was the whole goal.
You went after their money. You went after
Yep.
public support without going after property damage or things that could get you arrested and expelled from school, where you'd no longer have the ability to have any influence or power.
Yeah. And that's what led to us finding ourselves in the national education review, or whatever the fuck that's called.
Were you getting
and it was because of that, right?
The hunger strike?
Huh?
Were you getting press coverage of the hunger strike?
Yeah.
Local, national?
No, that was national. But it was because of that, right? It was because of that. It was because the tactics that we were using were about, basically, so there is a manipulation, and there's an element of truth to the manipulation as well, in terms of trying to create awareness beyond and to propagate agitprop beyond where our immediate reach was. And that looked like moving into the messaging that would hit in 10 seconds, 15 seconds, right? And I was learning that from folks in the press, because initially when I reached out to the press about these things that we were going to be doing that we knew were going to be disruptive, I was trying to not tell them what we were going to do or where. I would just try to say, we're going to do a thing. And finally, one of the reporters was like, listen, you don't have to tell me who you are, and you don't have to we don't have to get into all that. Okay. But if you don't tell me what you're doing, I can't write anything. I need you to we've got to develop some trust. And so then, and again, we were very paranoid. And so from that point, it was like, okay, who do we know who knows this person, so that we can find out if we can trust that person, right? Keeping in mind, we had stayed at Wounded Knee at this point, right? We had worked with people who had been assassinated at that battle, their families, right? And so the idea that we were just going to be trusting the press or the government or whatever else, having been trained by these hippies and revolutionaries and folks who had been in different conflicts. But no, we'd been talking to people dealing with the FMLN. We'd been talking to Zapatistas. We'd been talking to folks who were standing in front of the tanks in China. Why would I listen to you, newspaper boy? And of course, it's some writer who's 30. And
because I want to write about what you want me to write about.
Exactly. So developing and trusting that relationship with trusted members of the press was the next part of the learning. And then learning how to bring it down into very simple bites and imagery, including the faceless administrator was just a paper mask or a white paper plate with eyes cut out and a line, right?
Very low budget, low tech.
Right, very low budget. Signs were all made by us, just very simple. What can we do with what we have, where we stand right now? And that is ours. And what we had that was ours, as I was convinced, was our bodies. And so then the propaganda that I put on top of that, as we were talking about, don't send your kids here, was because I had a long history at the university, because my father went there, my uncle went there, which was not how I ended up with the access to those other places. That was me just walking around being a dingbat. That I framed myself I stole it from Malcolm X, but I framed myself as a patriot to the university. And I said that I was doing this because I love this university. I'm a buff to the core. I fucking hate CU. I don't give a shit about CU. I am not a buff to my core. But by saying that, right, when we were doing the student rallies that had been announced and now had 1,000 people at them, now I'm saying to 1,000 people that the patriotic thing to do, right, is to be part of this movement, right?
Mm-hmm.
And adopting the language taught by Asada Shakur, who was still very much alive at the time. The teachings of Bell Hooks, the language of Malcolm and the mannerisms, and of course the hypersexism that meant that me still acting very much as boy.
Yeah, but that strategy of I'm doing this in service of what you say you believe in, instead of
Yes.
that oppositional, you're terrible, do better kind of shame, guilt kind of thing that we tend to go into is not always as effective as we think it is. All right.
Yeah.
We've been here
we were
for
building
almost
friendship.
an hour, and I appreciate your time so much. I can't believe that's been an hour already.
A lot of
Real quickly, to wrap it up, how many days did the hunger strike last?
It was terrible. 5.
5 days. And what was the thing that, from your understanding, pushed the admin to finally give in to your demands? The national press coverage, community outrage, the number of students who were joining in, their inability to like.
It was when 2 of ours went to the hospital. The human body needs calories. And if you are on a hunger strike, typically that is done unless it is a protestation for an emergency with a certain amount of caloric intake, because your mind has to be able to work. You can't negotiate. There's a way to do it. We didn't know that. And so we were on just water. And that is not great. So 2 folks got very ill. Both very
and the administration said, "Oh God, we're going to be held liable for these students. Just give them what they want."
Not close to that. Yeah, they were like, "Oh shit, they're going to die," and then they brought us in for another meeting, and they happened to be the president of the school, and so it was nobody in the room except for us and the president, and the other thing that was happening again was that she was being hunted down by regents at that time, because she was too much of not a man for them and to be the president of the school, because it's a football culture. And so, Bill McCartney and the Promise Makers, who turned into the Promise Keepers, who turned into the Proud Boys, come from there. Oh. Bill McCartney, actually, who was the coach of the football team, was one of the Promise Makers. So that's how that elevated, right? So that was the environment she was in. Mm-hmm. So when we all sat down, she had been being fucked with by regents for the entirety of the year. She knew they were coming after her already. Oh, she saw our demands. They seemed very reasonable to her. I gave her the whole, hey, here's how the classes would go. This was what would happen. Da, da, da. And she said, okay, let's go through all 5 of the demands. What exactly is it? And so we said it again. We were like, we want the undergraduate program. She was like, that doesn't seem out of pocket. I mean, Sarah's here. Okay, what else? We said the master's program, because otherwise, what are we doing? She's like, okay, I mean, if we can find instructors, it's probably going to take more time, but okay. And then we said, and you need to establish the PhD. She was like, okay, that's going to take time. I was like, okay, but we need the promise. We need the promise that that's going to happen. And then also we need tenure for these 3 professors. And they were like, what? And they were like, yeah, all 3. And they all get moved over to the ethnic studies department. And what the hell was the last demand? It was tenure, probably something about absolution. I mean, you know,
I mean, the important thing
and then
there for me is that you had a plan and your demands had actual implementable steps. It wasn't just a broad, we want you to fix this thing with no idea about how to do it. You had demands that were actually practical and implementable. And so once you finally got the person who had the power and was willing to negotiate with you, you had a real plan you were able to discuss and implement.
Yeah, and a charm offensive again, right? Like the idea, and I'm not saying that in some weird way. The idea that you connect, that I know, I'm uncomfortable with the idea that people seem to be comfortable connecting with me, and if that is the case, and since that is the case, then the question becomes: is it responsible of me at all to not use that on behalf of transformative development for people? And while specific skills that I developed are certainly, as I said, very based in my own neurotypathy and my own self-interest, my self-interest was in having a space. And so that helped me develop into a space creator, not because I thought that I somehow knew how to fix anything. It was because I felt like what was offered did not serve what I needed. And so I was trying to create places that I could be and that my friends could be, and have learned over many, 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 many years since then, because this is all 30 years ago now, right? 2 years
Close
ago.
enough. Something like that.
Whatever. that we are far more interconnected. And, you know, a lot of this touring the U.S. as well, right? We are far more interconnected, and there are far more folk who are interested in living freedom than are interested in fighting with their neighbors. It's just the ones who fight with their neighbors end up finding themselves getting videotaped and put up on YouTube. So it's like, you know, that's part, and it serves the system
momentum, right? And it's like, you're always very clear that you did not do this alone. It required all of these people who worked with you. It wasn't even your original idea. But what you did bring to it, it sounds like, and my guess is it would have been hard for this movement to find success without you in the particular role that you played, because you had so much network and so many relationships, and that you do have that, all those planets in Libra. You know, people want to know you, but also that ability to inspire people into action, and then to actually put in the work to figure out what that action is going to be and be strategic in how you thought it through. So thank you for sharing all that. I'm sure we could probably talk about it for another hour. And thanks to the folks who are here live for being with us live. Welcome to drop any questions you have in the chat. I did some mapping of this on my little Miro board while we're talking, so I'll post that in the community. If
there are writers who I know who will love that.
It's not that good, but it's a start of some things I mapped out here. And yeah, I appreciate, would love to hear from others in the community about your experiences in transformational movements. Even if it wasn't a hunger strike, it could be what it took to get the racial harm policy at your organization enacted, or to get something taken on or off of the lunch menu at school, or, you know, there's just like so many things community organizing, political organizing, whatever it is. I know we've got lots of folks who've done so many things in the community. I'd love to hear some of those stories about transformation and organizing, and what lessons we can learn from the successes we've all experienced.
You're blocked. Did you get a sign put in, taken out? All of that. And I'm not saying that like facetiously in any regard. I mean, that is the stuff that is community belonging. And I'm not trying to stretch this out, but one of the big lessons from Invest that taught all of, aside from the name, that taught all of us very deeply about being in the moment and being in the community that I had was being on the reservation, right? Being on Rosebud, just outside of Wounded Knee, and there was a flood, and was it Rosebud? No, it was the second res. It was one of the two reses I was on. I stayed on two different reservations, two different times. One of the reservations I was staying with, there was a flood. I happened to be with some community members, and the road was gone. It just wasn't there. Once the water stopped, we literally had to rebuild the road. And it wasn't that anybody ever called anybody. It wasn't that anybody said anything to anybody. It was, hey, do you want to go to town next week? Okay, let's go. So everybody just got up. And at a point, we found ourselves like just rolling out logs that people had brought. We recreated the road. The road was back. There were like 8 different trucks, people with shovels and tools and whatever, out of nowhere, right? And 2 hours later, the road was fixed. That kind of investment in where you stay and the people with whom you work is the key to being able to navigate this moment that we're in. I firmly believe, right? Because how you make people feel is how that is the legacy. There's nothing else, right? And so having people feel deeply enough invested in their own community that the idea of like, oh, the road's broken, great, we're going to fix it. We're not waiting for anybody. Like that really was one of the key lessons from real people, right? That I then carried over into this idea of like, okay, how do we cast the widest net that the most people who have committed themselves to be here will be celebrants of, right? And that was the idea of like, okay, be a patriot, be one of the buffs, and like, let's win ethnic studies like a football game.
And this is a question we don't need to try to answer today, but I just wondered the impact on all of you who are involved in that movement, how many things you were able to go move in your lives, how much, confidence and inspiration it gave you to be agents of change, and the other things you did in your lives after having led such a successful movement so young. And so I think that's another takeaway too for folks is like, start where you are, start with things that matter to people's lives in your actual community where you're building, and then build with small wins. Those small wins, we have a tendency to kind of, and this wasn't a small win by any means, but I bet there were a number of small wins before that with each of those student associations. I bet there were a number of small wins on different things that y'all advocated for before you got to that point. That those things, even though if they feel small in the moment, deserve to be celebrated, because from those wins and from the losses, we learn about what to try next, and we are able to develop strategy and not just cosplay the revolutionaries, like the people who wanted to occupy the building or take up arms or something, but actually develop a strategy that is designed and practical and winnable for the actual circumstances in the moment that you're in, instead of trying to replicating something that worked in some other time and place under different circumstances.
Yeah, and foundationally strategic. That I think that is the thing that made the difference and led to the success, right? Is that as you are doing a thing, that the strategy has to be foundationally strategic to your moment. It cannot just be, this has been the strategy that has succeeded, right? That's DC. You're just following Marvel's path. You can't do that. Marvel did that. You got to do your thing. And every artist, every movement, every creator, every innovator, every parent learns that over and over again. Your path is your path. Your race is your race. Nobody else is doing your part, right? You're doing it with your community, and that's where that's That's all there is. That's all there is. Everything else is just funsies, which is great. Funsies are great, but that's how change happens, I think.
All right. Well, thank you so much for talking through, some action that created some change. One of many times in your life that's been true. And thanks for the folks who joined us here live, and for everybody who's joining us watching this video, or perhaps this will be our podcast episode for the week.
Just might.
All right. Take good care of yourselves out there. We'll see you soon.